the notable, the infamous empire in Europe. And also it marked technically the end of the Ottoman Empire, the empire that was the last, of course, hold in the hope of the Muslim Ummah. It was also the year in which the last Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, who was deposed from his power in 1908, died. We discussed before, right? So he was removed from his power in 1908, and then for about the next 10 years he lived, in a very sad state, and also in isolation under house arrest. So arguably he is the last, or he was the last Khalifa and Sultan, because he was the one who had all unfettered executive rights to decide the affairs of the state, the empire, on his own. So he passed away also in the same year. You can see how things unfold and how things change and how the situation, subhanAllah, rapidly developed for the future of the world. A future that the world was heading to was not necessarily very bright in many ways, especially for the Muslims, a very dark, depressing and difficult. Not just for Turkey itself, not just for the Muslim world, but also the Muslim Ummah in general. Now, after the removal of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, as I stated, subhanAllah, there had been a number of head figures that rose and were brought to power. So the technical and official last Sultan was, of course, a different one, not Sultan Abdul Hamid, and it was Sultan Abdul Majid II. Sultan Abdul Majid II. SubhanAllah, their names also represent in ways the personalities and the individuals, right? Abdul Majid, Abdul Hamid, Sulaiman and Salim, very beautiful, meaningful names, which unfortunately Muslim Ummah is all in a new crisis right now. We have, of course it's not related to the topic, but because I deal with this a lot, people come up with very bizarre, weird names. Very, very weird names, trying to name their babies. The other day I had a name, then I asked, they brought that baby to me to make dua. So the name that they named their baby was, Tashdeed. So I asked the parents, what made you choose this name? They said, because it was something that we felt meeting or matching the name of the father and the mother and the family. This is why we chose. No wonder this is the effect of the name on his personality, that he's becoming very harsh on himself, let alone how harsh he would be on the people in his future around. What does Tashdeed mean? Someone who is forceful, right? On the other time, there was this girl that was named like Zunubia, right? The person who is full of zunub, full of sins. And another time, Zahabiya, as if she was made of gold. Very sad. Therefore, don't follow this craze that have to have a very unique name. Forget about uniqueness. What matters the meaning of the name, not the uniqueness of the name. Right? This is where the problem lies. Oh, I want a name that nobody should have. Whether good luck, you will never be able to find a name that nobody ever has. Right? So, Sultan Abdul Hamid, Abdul Majid, very beautiful. You're just reflecting on the names. It's something, subhanAllah, brings the glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who praises Allah, the one who glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very beautiful names. So, Sultan Abdul Majid officially was the last Khalifa and the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, although he was just like a head figure, ceremonial type, nominal, as I stated, like Queen of England, that doesn't really have any authority, but just seen as the head figure. but he tried at least to intervene and to interfere in some of the matters, and because of his interference in the affairs of Ottoman Empire, what ended up happening is that they again deposed him from that position. They themselves brought him, and they also removed him. And as they removed him, not only removed him, they also exiled him. They exiled him out of the whole land, the whole country, because now technically Ottoman Empire was over, right? Because first, remember we talked about the European part was taken over by Europe itself when Ottomans lost the war in the War of Balkan. They no longer had that. Now what they all had was the Muslim world, including Turkey, the surrounding of it. But even then, the World War I, we know the treaty, the agreement between Arabs and Britain and the rest, which even destroyed that part, and now it reduced pretty much to very much like, like very, it makes this very sad connection. Recall when we discussed how Constantinople remained just on its own, losing all of its territory just to the one city like that. So the encroachment of the land, annexation of the land was such that many countries came out as a result of that, the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. And what we see today as the Muslim nations, what we see today as a Muslim nation, all of this has come into reality after the collapse of Ottoman Empire. Otherwise it was no such Muslim nations. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, and all of that, it is all the result of the end of the Ottoman Empire. Names existed, but they were not like as nation states. So that part was also pretty much over. And so when that happened, of course, it was a very small area left as the Allies and the forces of the Allies walked in, and they actively tried to take over, walking in Palestine, walking in Turkey, walking in all of these areas, taking over these regions. So Sultan Abdul Majid, who had some kind of interference in the affairs of the state, because Young Turks were the one officially behind the scene and technically running the affairs, who were very secular, irreligious, and in fact very, very anti-religion, right? We talked about that before. We'll discuss it perhaps more in detail when we talk about Ataturk himself, who was the leader chosen and spearheaded the movement in many ways. Ya Latif. So because of the involvement and the interference of Sultan Abdul Majid II, he was deposed and he was also exiled. So when he was exiled, of course, if you read about his this situation when he had to leave because of this force and removal, a person who belonged to this very royal family, an Ottoman Empire, the most superpower empire of the time, right? The most superpower belonging to that lineage and that family, just you can imagine. But when he left in such a very weak and sad and deteriorating state that you will be shocked when you hear that. So he, along with his family, was exiled, so he had to travel to Europe without a passport, without documentation. There was really nothing, just trying to somehow find some refuge somewhere in the world. So he first traveled traveling to Europe, Switzerland, he stayed for some time there, and then finally moved to France, and this city in France, Nice, where he settled in. And when he settled in, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The situation was such, I don't even know how he managed, but the situation was such that he had 0 cent or dollar in his pocket, literally depending on the food stamps. Literally depending on the food stamps to survive on. This is why I said, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. A time came in the life of the same individual that where became as if a beggar to beg in order to survive. May Allah never ever allow such days in anyone's life to be able to see that. Right? It is not easy, especially when you come from that line of honor, dignity, respect, and wealth. Then suddenly you are extending your hands. I mentioned many times, there is a very good book to read, Tariq Azimabad. In that book, the author mentions, I have myself seen with my own eyes when Mughal Empire ended in India, Delhi Sultanate ended, the royal members of the royal family were in the street, covered their faces, begging people for food. قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. Do not ever be pride. Do not ever have the sense of pride over anything that you have. It is from Allah and can be taken away any moment from you. So it was shocking to know, to read that he became so helpless, so hopeless in a foreign land, not even in your own land, right? That you have to depend on charity in order to survive. So it was here, Red Cross, Christian organization, who he had to contact for financial help. Red Cross is not a new organization. It has been, subhanAllah, in operation for many decades. It's more than 100 years. It was very, very Christianized back in the days. It is slightly secular now, but origin is very Christian and very religious. And they had their strong networking. Even back in the days, they were very active in France. So it was this Red Cross that when they found out, oh, this is the royal family and is here, and basically, of course, when you are accustomed to, again, subhanAllah, history is, it is very interesting and very painful when you read. One leads to the other event. So when you accustom yourself, we all are guilty of it. May Allah forgive me, one first and foremost. When you start living a comfortable life, then suddenly if the days change in your life, it is very challenging for you to adapt that lifestyle for you. Very difficult. If you read the history of Sassanid Empire, for example, and one of the emirs, one of the kings, I forgot the name. So when the army had attacked Sassanid Empire, not during the Islamic Empire time, it was around that time, perhaps the same era, if I am mistaken. But so when he ran for life, so he had to flee. As he fled, he went into rural areas. And of course, back in the days, like I said, today, even though you have never met a person in person, but you know him because of social media, because of the images on. Back in the days, you only hear the name, not knowing who he was. Right? This is why when Rasulullah arrived in Medina, the whole Arabia knew him, but just by name, not by face. So when he arrived in Medina, he was with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So people were confused who Rasulullah was between the two. Right? Mistakenly going to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, assuming that it might be him. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, noticing that as a wise man, as a religious man, what he did, so he stood up and set up a tent, something over the head of Rasulullah to indicate that this is the Messenger of Allah. So when this king fled for life, so he ended up within his own territory, trying to seek a refuge. So a villager, a poor man, so he knocked on the door. So he said, then he welcomed him after he heard his name. Oh, you are the king of our locality, our territory, our kingdom. So please come in. This is my broken house, broken heart. If there is anything that I could do. So he took him in, and now he was very thirsty. He was very thirsty. So he asked him, you could say a glass of water in our time. I don't know what he asked, but basically water. So it was presented to him. But obviously he was a poor man. He didn't have special glasses, containers. So he offered him in something made of clay. So he refused to drink water in that clay because he never drank in his life. He said, I cannot drink water. It is beneath me to accept this. You see, when you accustom yourself to comfortable life, then you would suffer, but you would not compromise. This is the reason Islamic history has always emphasized on living simple life, a life of, subhanAllah, humility and tawadu, right? Of course, you use things, but never enslave yourself to the things. So, Red Cross, of course, when he depended on Red Cross, obviously knowing his needs, even they could not help him enough. Even they could not help him enough. So it was here they started to publicize the news in the Muslims, or the Muslim world of the time. Hey, your Sultan is here in such a poor state, depending on the food stamps and help. You guys should do something to help him out. You guys should do something to help him out, at least to be able to live. So Red Cross made this announcement, and of course there was limited resources anyway for such announcements to be publicized. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. So as this announcement went viral, in whichever way it went viral, so it made its way. Now I'm going into a historic tangent which has, to me has a relevance, and also hopefully to you as well, because first of all it has to do with Ottoman Empire, but also it involves an area that has nothing to do with Ottoman Empire. Okay. So the news slowly made its way to India. And remember we talked about Khilafat movement. Those of you who heard or at least read, you are familiar with this Khilafat movement. So it was during this period in 1920s that there was this active campaign, not in Ottoman lands, outside of Ottoman lands, to protect, defend and support the Khilafah to remain in power. And India was one of those places. So they had this Khilafat movement, and many Muslims, not the modern day India, rather the bigger, broader, wider India that included Burma, that included Bangladesh, Pakistan, all of that. So this Khilafat movement, because of that, it was quite known, what Khilafah was and who sultans were, etc. Right? So in India, especially the place that it really changed things was Hyderabad, the city that I am from. So it is for this reason I have interest in this part to share with you. So Hyderabad, of course, today is just a city, but the period that I'm talking about, it was not just a city as a city. It was in itself a mini dynasty within India. It was a mini dynasty within India. And this dynasty was known, and today even known in history as Nizam dynasty. Nizam dynasty, right? You may be familiar with this. So Nizam dynasty, of course, it started off during Mughal period especially Alamgir, rahmatullah, during his period, when this area, of course, was under the control of Mughal Empire, so they gave semi-independence to this region, allowing this family to to administer the affairs. So, and because this family that was known as Asif Jahi family, of course, they were very wealthy, and because of that, they had this privilege to be able to run the affair of that region. And at its peak time, this region, geographic location, was bigger than England and Turkey. SubhanAllah, many neighboring provinces were part of Sultanate Hyderabad, Sultanate Osmania. And this is also interesting. That there is Khilafat Osmania, there is also Sultanate Osmania in this region, naming after one of their Nawabs. So, and they had about 7 or 8 Nawabs to run this, dating back from 18th centuries to 19th and all the way until it finally ended. So the one that I want to focus is actually because played a very key role in this regard was Nawab As-Sabir, the 7th Nawab of this Nizam dynasty, whose name was Mir Osman Ali. Mir Osman Ali was the one who in many ways became very known in the history of India and also in the world history for certain reasons, which I will briefly share with you. But it was Mir Osman Ali that finally the news of the Sultan reached him. Osman, his name, and the news of the Sultan of Khilafat Osmaniya reached him. So when it reached him, so of course those who brought the situation, the poor condition of the Sultan to him, Muslims of course the region, and they requested him. They requested him that, he should do something. So why should he do something? Because subhanAllah, when we look at this individual, Mir Osman Ali, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with a massive wealth. He indeed, if you read about him, there are a number of writings about him and about his wealth. He was among the 5 most or wealthiest people in human history. 5 most or wealthiest people in human history. His assets, estimated back in the days, which today equals to like $250 billion. $250 billion worth of asset. So he was, they say in human history, he ranks as number 5, one of the 5 figures who had such a massive wealth. So where did he get all of this wealth from? So Hyderabad back in the days, of course, had, subhanAllah, as a fortune. His fortune shined because today there are different mines in the world, right, that produce diamonds. So in those days, in this region, they had multiple, subhanAllah, diamond mines. Diamond mines. One of them, very infamous one, is Golconda Diamond Mine, which is right in the city. And of course, the neighboring regions also had a number of diamond mines. So, of course, it would produce diamonds. And subhanAllah, because of that, his fortune shined and he became like one of the most wealthiest individual in human history as a result of that. So it is said about him, one of the very precious diamond, Jacob diamond, which worth millions of dollars. Today it is Indian treasury by the government of India. So he used that diamond as a paperweight, as a paperweight to just put on his books when he would read. So Queen of England, if you have seen her images, she on official occasions she would wear a special necklace. So that necklace was gifted by him to her. So she would wear a customized one. He gifted this to her, and she would wear it only on official occasions. Even it's like a very purple blue type of bluish type of diamonds, and this necklace is made of, which was of course millions and billions of dollars. So he gifted that to her. And this also very famous diamond that we might have heard the name, right? It's called Kohinoor. Kohinoor. And Kohinoor, the meaning of it is the mountain of light. So, in my city there is, of course, a museum. It's called Saraj Museum. So a section of that has been devoted to the jewelry of Nizam family. So there are some of the most precious diamonds are still there. So if one of the rooms, if you walk in, of course, Kohinoor is not anymore in India. It is in England. So it is in England, and it is part of the British Crown Treasury and jewelry, unfortunately. But still, there are a number of diamonds that this region produced that was part of this royal family, an Indian royal family, Osmani family. And then they, of course, now you can see some of them in the museum. So one room, if you walk in that, I remember when I was visiting it, so there is no light. They have just one shelf made, of course, heavily guarded. So that whole room is lit because of that reflection of that diamond. So that's the beauty and the power of it, perhaps. The whole room, it's quite like, almost half of this hall. So of course, because of that, he became very rich. So anyway, so it was this individual who was the 7th Nawab of Hyderabad, Sultanate Hyderabad, and who received this news, and because of the request, so he assigned a monthly allowance for this Sultan Abdul Majid to receive on a monthly basis. And it was like, back in the days, of course, it wasn't massive amount, but it's still a reasonable good amount, like 300 pounds, that he will receive every month from us to be able to live off. And of course, this assisted in some ways to stabilize the financial situation for Sultan Abdul Majid. But a few more things about Mir Osman Ali, then you will see how these things connect each other actually. This and Sultan Osmaniya and Sultan Abdul Majid and the rest. So during the British Raj, when they were about to end their rule in India, of course, the goal was, of course, to have one united India, right? But Mir Osman Ali refused to assimilate and become part of India as an independent country. He said, because he had developed the country, his state, I should say that, to a point that the whole India would will envy that. He had a mini state within Indian territory that, subhanAllah, that had its own railway system, its own postage system, its own currency even. And it was a very wealthy state. And everything he was fully independent. And he said, why should I then join India? Because when I myself have such a massive wealth that I can run my own country. So of course, Pakistan wanted it to be part of Pakistan. He said, how is it going to work? Pakistan is all the way there and India in Hyderabad is here. So he refused. Muhammad Ali Jinnah reached out to him. Said, he accepts the proposal and becomes part of India, part of Pakistan. He refused that. And India was pressurizing him to join India, so he refused in that one. So he asked the British that if they intervene to allow him to remain independent. And he was the one who, Mir Osman Ali, he did some of the interesting things. One of the things he did was he became the first Muslim ruler to establish a university in my city, Hyderabad, Osmani University, that introduced medium of education, Urdu, to be as the official language. They really, subhanAllah, they had this whole Da'iratul Ma'arif, subhanAllah, there is so much history in it. The goal and the job of Da'iratul Ma'arif, that because it was the time when the Europeans were advancing, they were the one taking over all walks of all fields, medicine, engineering, aeronautic engineering, and all of that. So today we have all of these technical terms in English, right? So the job of this Da'iratul Ma'arif was to find equivalent Urdu words for those technical terms, so that Urdu remains as a very up-to-date language, not outdated language. That's an amazing contribution. Another great contribution of Mir Osman Ali is, which no longer, applicable because, mashallah, we have many more options now, but up until 18th centuries, 19th century, sorry, Mohammed Pickthall, how many of us have heard the name, right? Pickthall, the very famous British guy who converted to Islam. So it was this individual, Mir Osman Ali, had invited to come to Hyderabad, India. So he lived in India, Hyderabad for 15 years. And he set an allowance, financial allowance for him to receive, and he gave him an assignment. And that assignment was that he would translate the Quran in English. And that became the first English official translation. If you read the introduction of the Pickthall's translation of the Quran, you will see he praised Mir Osman Ali in that. So, because of this, of course, British said, we cannot honor your request because we cannot allow many independent state within the country. So they refused, and Pakistan, of course, he refused, and all of that. It went in a way that, of course, it led to the suqut. But before that happened, of course, when the allowance was set and approved by Mir Osman Ali for Sultan Abdul Majid in Paris, so now there came a new situation merging both of these families into one. And that was, subhanAllah, because Sultan Abdul Majid, who went in exile with his whole family, but it was just his wife, and he had only one daughter. He had only one daughter by the name of Durr Shahwar. That was his daughter. Of course, they were living in France with him. So Mir Osman Ali proposed Sultan Abdul Majid, that he marries off his daughter to his son. So that was a proposal made, and this was, subhanAllah, you can see now where the story is heading towards, right? How it is going to connect. So it was this daughter who was the imperial princess of the Ottoman Empire. And it was this girl that, subhanAllah, a number of Umara and Sultans were competing to have her for their sons. Shah of Iran wanted, her for his son. King of Egypt wanted her for his son. And Mir Usman Ali wanted her for his son. All of these proposals, subhanAllah, came. But of course, the one who won this race was Mir Usman Ali. So he was the one, he accepted, who Sultan Abdul Majid accepted his proposal, of course, because of his wealth and because of his power and because of his, subhanAllah, prestige and all of that. So he accepted the proposal of Mir Usman Ali. Hence the whole entourage from Hyderabad, India, went all the way to France, in Paris, and they had this, in Nice especially, not Paris, in Nice, there was this hotel, subhanAllah, they said that the photographers had a field trip seeing all this Maharaja family and royal family in their royal dress code, walking the streets of France, and the wedding was done in that manner. As the wedding was done, of course, then she was brought, who the daughter of Sultan Abdul Majid, to India, Hyderabad. So of course, she moved. So she moved to Hyderabad and she lived in Hyderabad and she died in Hyderabad. Her qabr is, there are a number of hospitals, and those of you or at least have seen Hyderabad know there is a hospital which is called Durr-e-Shahwar Hospital. It was named after her. And there are a few other hospitals and charitable trusts like that. So she moved to Hyderabad and she lived. Now it was this union, you can see this became this incident. This incident of marriage became subhanAllah, a very celebrated event in the Muslim world, not just in India or not just for the family. The bulk of Muslim world celebrated it. One very rich royal family marrying to the most superpower, actually at one point in time, the Ottoman Empire's family. Right? Why were they happy? Because this was the time that was very depressing time for the Muslims. The time that they had been losing at all fronts, losing politically, financially, and all areas, aspects. So they saw this as a good sign. Hopefully this is going to somehow revive the glory of the Muslim Ummah. Because Ottoman, they did not have any more hope, but because of this marriage, they saw, that Muslims saw, hopefully a figure will come out that inshallah will serve as a kind of messianic figure to save and revive the glory of the Muslim Ummah. So after this marriage, of course, subhanAllah, there was this individual born as a result of this marriage, and that was Mir Mukarramja, the last, this eighth Nawab of the Nizam dynasty, the eighth Nawab. So he was born, and so when he was born, of course, there was a jubilee and celebration within the family, and both families in fact, but also in many ways across the country. So the reason this became very important, now what they were expecting to come about, they thought that now the dream is coming to its fruition. Of course, when he was born, so Nawab Mir Usman Ali, who of course was this very main figure, very rich man, right, because of his wealth. Times magazine, today Times magazine has no value, but back in the days it was a royal magazine. So because of his wealth, they had featured him on the cover page saying, the richest man on earth. There is a still archive file that you can find his image on. So because of, when he was born and his grandson was born, generally it is the father that, the Nawabship or the Sultanate is shifted and transferred from father to son, right? But in this case, Mir Usman Ali decided that I'm going to bypass my son and will transfer directly this to my grandson. Because of this intermarriage and because of Usmani blood and also this wealthy family coming together. So there were about 104 grandchildren that he had at the time. 104 who? Mir Usman Ali. But out of all of them, he chose this one, Mir Mukarram Jah, to be his successor. But obviously his life, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, was not as expected. So in 1948, when the pressure built around Sultanate Hyderabad, when it's not going to work out, so subhanAllah, finally Indian army marched in Hyderabad. This is called Suqut Hyderabad. There was a battle, and then many Muslims unfortunately died as a result of it. And so as Sultan Abdul Majid became the last officially Khalifa of Khilafat Osmaniya, Mir Osman Ali became the last Nawab of Sultanate Osmaniya. So because Hyderabad was, merged into India forcefully. He did not want, people did not want, but India really wanted, because it was the most, like today, India really doing its best to what? Protect Kashmir and maintain Kashmir as part of India, right? Like it's a matter of pride and honor. It's a very rich resource. So back in the days, it was Hyderabad like that. So when they did take over, of course, you can imagine the amount of wealth they also confiscated. Many of the assets, India just devoured without even, subhanAllah, they say, burping it. So many assets were just taken without any compensation. So because of that, now this Mukarram Jah, of course, he lived a very isolated life. He chose Australia to live much of his life, and then finally he decided to move to Turkey, the birthplace of his mother, right? So, and then he lived the last phase of his life, and then subhanAllah, he just died. This is one of the reasons that I mentioned this in details, was because he died just 2 years ago. It's as if, it's so relevant to our time, just to 2022. 2 years ago he died, and he died in Turkey, one of the remote areas in Turkey. So his wish was, although he chose that place to live, but his wish was that, to be brought back to Hyderabad, India, and buried there. So his body was transported, and there was a massive funeral, and he was laid to rest next to his families that had already died and buried there. So this was the end of this Nawab, the period, and also this brought to an end, subhanAllah, of Khilafat Osmaniya. So what about the death of Sultan Abdul Majid? It is here that inshallah we'll conclude. Sultan Abdul Majid II continued to live the rest of his life in in France, Nice, and then finally he died in France. But when he died in France, subhanAllah, because Young Turk movement, of course, was so strong, and of course this was a secular period now, because 1924 Khilafat officially ended, Khilafat Osmaniya, and now there came the period of modern secular Turkey, and it was this period that had really very, very sad period in the history of Turkey itself. It was never like that in the entire history of Turkey. So because of that mentality, very anti-religious mentality, and because seeing him as a figurehead belonging to this family that ruled over, and of course there is much more to it, but so when he died, his body supposed to be brought back to Turkey, but they refused to allow that. So subhanAllah, because of refusal, now Saudi Arabia became independent, of course. So his body was transported from France all the way to Hijaz, Saudi Arabia, and mashallah, he was given this honor to be buried in Medina in Jannat al-Baqi'. So his body is resting in Jannat al-Baqi' today. I mean, you don't have any signs to note, unfortunately. One of the sad parts of this Salafi movement, I'm sorry to say this, that they really desecrated all of these sacred sites, not leaving any trace behind for you. I mean, even I said this to one of the individuals, that so even when you walk in today in Jannat al-Baqi', we understand, of course, there is issue of shirk, issue of bid'ah, but this has existed always, but this is not the way to deal with it, right? Today, even you have no signs, people are still doing wrong. I mean, I saw myself, not last time, before last time, I think. So I actually laughed when subhanAllah, then I said to myself, look at the level of ignorance in the Ummah of Rasulullah. So one elderly man, in Masjid al-Nabawi, so, people at first, you walk by, the Hujra of Rasulullah and you present your salam, they generally don't allow you to stay unless there is a less crowd, then they become lenient, the authorities. So this very elderly man, assuming, and of course somewhere from India, Pakistan, I don't know, or Bangladesh, Wallahu Alam. So he came in front of the exact Hujra, or not exact Hujra, where the Muwajaha Sharifa is, where you're supposed to present your salam. So he looked at, he's presented salam and he literally went into sajda. You could see him going straight into sajda. And then subhanAllah, the shurda came and pulled him up. I said, of course you know, this is shirk, wrong. But what I'm trying to say, this issue will not end, whether you keep the things or remove the things. But what you lost was such a loss that you can never regain that. There were signs of all of the qubur. For example, this is the qabr of Aisha radiallahu anha, this is the qabr of Hafsa radiallahu anha, this is the qabr of this sahabi, that sahabi. Just seeing that, it brings comfort to your eyes, to your ruh, to your and to your soul, right? But now all of that is gone. All what you see just the qubur. So this type of very strict Salafi movement really did this. And so, but anyway, he is buried in that cemetery. And because they refused that, and Allah honored him, perhaps because of his ikhlas, because of his religiosity, Allah knows best. But so his body was transported all the way from France. Imagine back in the days how much difficult it must have been. All the way to Medina al-Munawwara, and then he was laid to rest in Jannat al-Baqi. So this is the sad episode that I wanted to go over. And then may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower mercy upon all of the marhumin and those who really struggled and strived hard to secure and protect the honor and the dignity of the Muslim Ummah, right? But of course enemies are always active, working against, and never be the agent of the enemies, or then you become the agent of shayateen. You have to have this wisdom and iman to be able to know who is yours and who is others, right? And it is this that is going to help you. So inshallah we'll end here and we'll continue tomorrow. سبحان الله بحمده سبحان الله اللهم بحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليه سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. This one, right? You know, it's not.